And what I wanted to say is today, is I think the seventh day of the Navaratras. Is it right? Seventh day, and it's the Kala Ratri. Okay, this is it's a terrific goddess. Okay, but it's meant to cleanse everything. Before the more benign, form of the goddess after Vijayadashmi. Sort of manifests. So I think when we talk about multiple pasts in India, these pasts are so full of trauma, and my book deals with them. And a trauma which we've tried to cover up, paper over, deny. Some critics have called it negationism, but I don't think that is the way forward. My book is actually about healing, healing the wounds of the national psyche. And I don't think healing can happen through denial and negationism. Instead, a deep cleansing process is required, such as Kala Ratri, the terrific goddess of the night, requires of us. But today is also Ganga Saptami, okay? So it's the day that the Ganges is supposed to have descended to the earth. And you know why she came, it's a story. But she actually came to purify us and cleanse us because Sagar's sons, etc. I won't go into the myths of etc. because my book is also about history, myth, ideology, imagination, and facts. What are facts? Are they really facts, or are there only narratives and perspectives? So the first part of the book is actually called Itihas Mimamsa, the poetics of the past. And in fact, I'm making the case, as you know, I'm a student of literature, and the historians always poach on literature and try to pretend that their cognition is superior to ours. I can name many historians, they're my friends, and they look at literary texts and derive historical insights and knowledge from them, use it as an evidence, evidentiary sources. I'm doing the opposite. I'm reversing the gaze as a literary critic and a writer myself. I look at history and I see in history narratives, you know, narratives of fact, so to speak, facts arranged in certain, ways and sequences with obvious agendas. And this is not a new idea. E.H. Carr wrote about this. And of course, Hayden White is the main so-called postmodernist historian who said history has much more in common with novels and fiction than it has with nonfiction. So that's a whole section in my book. But I mentioned this because the poetics of the past enjoins upon us to look at these very troubled, traumatic periods in our history and try to come to terms with them. Maybe through an ethics, if not of forgetting, of forgiveness, but certainly not of denial and negationism, and also certainly not of revenge. So today also happens to be the birthday of Bhagat Singh, if you're following these things. And the reason I bring these two contexts, the context of space, the topos of space, as the Greeks called it, which is this Bangalore city and my own associations with it, and also the other topos of time, of chronology, is because really these are the two intersecting, I would think, intersecting topoi, which we have to contend with if we have to look for how to go forward from here. Here's Sangeeta, fashionably late as ever, also from also from Alembic Glass Colony and Baldwin Girls School later. Here's to you, Sangeeta. I raised this glass of water. She's a wonderful cook, and I believe she's made us her mother's patented, I would call it a vanilla cake. Am I right? So these intersecting topoi of time and space are actually the locus of our discussion. And as I said, the purpose of the book is in a way to heal the nation. And now, obviously, that's a very lofty and idealistic, even ambitious purpose. But I call it the rebalancing of the nation's prana. The Prastavana makes a case for the rebalancing of the nation's prana. And the structure of the book, the three parts, Itihas Mimamsa, then Dakshinayan, I mean, usually we talk about Uttarayan, the sun moving into the, into the more luminous part of the zodiac and the days elongating. But my rediscovery of India, as it were, to hearken back to Jawaharlal Nehru's Discovery of India, a great book, by the way, okay, is it actually happens in the Dakshin and the erasure of those marks of trauma that the nation suffered, right? So Dakshinayan, and the final part of the book is actually called, after the Bhagavad Gita, Dharma Sansthapanarthaya. So what do we do from here? How do we heal? And I've given it in a gist, which is you can't right the wrongs of history through revenge, nor can you adopt the method of principled forgetting, which is the Hindu way, not principled remembrance, which is the Jewish way. The Hindu way is a principled forgetting. But I don't think that's the right way. Or appeasement, negationism. No. We have to find a third way, neither revenge nor appeasement. So, this is what my book is about, this third way. And similarly, in this face off between Savarkar and Gandhi, or Mohan and Vinayak, to make them human, to make them accessible to all of us. In this face off, I'm looking for a third way. I'm not looking for an either or. I'm not should I say, I'm not a fan of the people who polarize us and who say either you choose Savarkar or you choose Gandhi. I disagree. And I'm going to illustrate that in a moment. But we are going to come to 2nd of October, which is also Vijayadashmi, and you will see the amount of hate that the dead Mahatma is going to receive in India. I've been following it year after year after year. And it makes me wonder, what is it about him that is so challenging and destabilizing to us? And I leave that as a question for our audience to ponder over. But what I am arguing in my book is that this is a false choice that is being imposed upon us by people with ideological interests and political agendas, that you do not necessarily have to choose between them wholesale. But you can say, for example, that let's say on Gandhi's position on Khilafat, I disagree with Gandhi. You can say that, or with the Mahatma. And with Veer Savarkar's position on Hindutva, its definition as a Hindu is somebody whose holy land is India and birthplace is India. You can disagree. You can say instead that Hinduism is an invitation to everybody. Everyone is invited. And there are no preconditions to this invitation. It's an open system. It has no beginning, no end, no prophet, no book, no particular set of rituals, no church, and no father superior or mother superior, as the case may be. And in an open system, how can you put preconditions? Yes, you can say political Hinduism, if that's how you define Hindutva, has certain preconditions. Country first, for example. Fine. But Hinduism is a spiritual system, which is an open system. I believe it doesn't belong to any region or any country or any culture or any language or any period. It's actually synonymous, coextensive with the human quest. My mom is also a bit hard of hearing, so what happens is she may not hear what I'm saying, but she also speaks loudly. And I'm saying this because it's going to happen to all of us. We are all on the same, we are all going there. That's what I'm saying. We're all heading to the same destination, and we're all possibly arisen from the same source. This is a spiritual fact, which I think people in India or the so-called Hindus figured out long back. And just an anecdote which I mentioned in the book is that a lot of things happen in this country, right? And we produce so much literature. There's still about 4 million texts of Sanskrit which are not yet translated. But for whatever reason, we didn't have the same sense of, history nor the same traditions of historiography as other people had. For example, many of you may not know this and may be surprised to know this, that one of the greatest events in the ancient world, geopolitical events, was the conquest of a certain part of India by Alexander the Great, right? And there was a kingdom, a Greek kingdom that he left behind, which lasted for hundreds of years. And even today in Punjab, people trace their ancestry to the Greeks who had occupied or who lived there. But there's no Indian mention of Alexander. There is no Indian text, Indian source that mentions Alexander. How about that? We know that Muhammad of Ghazni invaded India 16 times or 17 times. There is no Indian record of that, those voyages or those invasions of pillage and loot and conquest. No Indian mention. Our greatest source on Muhammad Ghazni is Al-Baruni, a book which everybody must read. He tells you what's going on in India at that time. Now, does it mean that Indians were foolish or didn't know how to write or didn't record things? I disagree with that contention, because if you go to any temple, you go to Tanjavur, in this book, I have an episode in the Krishneshwar Jyotirlinga in near Aurangabad. And the inscription in the temples tells you that Ahilya Bai restored the temple. But it doesn't tell you who destroyed the temple. Why? So it's something to think about, is all I'm saying. So the third way that I'm talking about is not a way that forces you to choose between Savarkar and Gandhi wholesale. You can disagree with Gandhiji and say, he was so wrong about the Khilafat. Trying to revive the caliphate, that's what it was about, was not what the Turkish people wanted. They brought in Kemal Ataturk. And here Gandhiji, for the sake of Hindu-Muslim unity, was giving this call for Khilafat. And it resulted in a terrible massacre in Kerala, the Mopla massacre. Anyhow, so we don't agree with Gandhiji there. Similarly, as I said, there are things on which you need not agree with Savarkar, including his notion of how a Hindu is to be defined. And yet, there's so many things about Savarkar, and maybe you don't agree with his use of violence as a way to achieve political ends, though the overthrow of colonial authority through violence, I think most of us would agree, is not ethically illegitimate. It's only Gandhiji who goes to that extent. If you went to the Bhagavad Gita, it doesn't consider violence as a last resort against established evil as illegitimate. And in fact, in my earlier book on Gandhiji, I showed how Gandhiji himself acknowledged that his brand of non-violence had failed. And it was Gandhiji who said, send the troops to Kashmir. So please, if you have time, look at that record. And it resulted, Nehru was reluctant. And because Gandhiji said, send the troops, the commander-in-chief of the Indian armed forces, who was a Britisher, resigned. And of course, it was a British game, to keep Pakistan, to keep Gilgit-Baltistan. We needn't go into that immediately. So the point I'm trying to make is that you don't have to choose in that fashion between this and that. But you can say on certain things you agree, on certain things you disagree. So this is what I call intermedial hermeneutics. Right? So let's say, I'll give you another example, Zelensky versus Putin, just to apply it to our contemporary times. You don't have to choose wholesale. Intermedial hermeneutics, or anvikshiki, as I, sort of retool it, allows you to say, on this, we disagree with Zelensky, on A, B, and C, trying to completely realign, join NATO, whatever. You may also say it's none of our business. But in the book, the things that we talk about are indeed our business. And then you can say, well, I disagree with Putin that he has to go and invade and kill so many people. There might have been other ways to do it. So intermedial hermeneutics is a way to negotiate polarities without being compelled to join one side or the other. And I believe it is a requirement of our times. So in a sense, my book is as much about how to think, as it is about, the particular topics that the book covers. Now, without further ado, let me come to the topic or the title of my talk. Savarkar and Gandhi, shall the twain ever meet? Now, the twain actually met. Let me start with that clarification. Gandhiji and Savarkar, Veer Savarkar, actually met. We used to think they met only twice. In 1909, at the India House of Shamji Krishna Varma, which was a den of revolutionaries, or a hotbed of revolutionaries, if you want to call it that. And they also met in 1927 when Gandhiji went to visit Savarkar, who was in house imprisonment after his release from the Andamans. So these two meetings are recorded. And the first meeting I mention in my book. But there was a meeting even earlier, and this was in 1906 when Gandhiji was again in London and on a mission to work for the Indian community in South Africa. And again in India House, he met Savarkar. And there are multiple records of this. And our own Bangalore boy, Vikram Sampath, has also written about it. And the way that that narrative goes, or it is recounted, though we cannot be sure, is that when Gandhiji visited India House, Savarkar was cooking. And it was October, by the way. It's the same time, around the same time, and of the year in terms of the Indian calendar. And Savarkar, it seems, was making prawns. And you know which community Savarkar comes from, right? The same community that Vinoba Bhave comes from, and Nathuram Godse comes from, and Gopal Krishna Gokhale comes from, etc., and I come from. Okay, so anyhow, so we are not habitually accustomed to eating prawns. And the point is that Savarkar was a very modern person. He probably even ate beef. He didn't care about vegetarianism. And Gandhiji was a sworn vegetarian already. So you can imagine that the first meeting itself didn't go off very well. But the point of departure actually came in 1909 when both of them spoke at the India House on the occasion of Vijayadashmi. And they disagreed on the means that Indians had to adopt to overthrow the British, to win freedom. And they disagreed. And that, in a way, is the point of departure in my own book. Because 1909 is the year when two great books were written by two great freedom fighters from two opposing sides of the Swaraj spectrum. So there was Gandhiji, who wrote Hind Swaraj while traveling back on the SS Kildonan Castle. It's the name of a ship, steamship. SS stands for steamship. From Southampton to South Africa. And he wrote Hind Swaraj in 19 days. First with his right hand, not first, but when his right hand was tired, he wrote with his left hand. Gandhiji was ambidextrous. He was really a Sabyasachi, okay? And he wrote to Kallenbach, I think I have written an original book. It is an original book. It's a very difficult book. It has its following and it has its detractors. In fact, Gopal Krishna Gokhale said that this is a book written by a madcap and Gandhi will forswear it within a year. And right up to the 1930s, Gandhiji never gave up on his ideas. He said, I will only change a few words. And one word he said he would change, and pardon my French, in the original, he had likened the British Parliament to a prostitute. It's not my word, it's Gandhiji's word. And he said, I would not use that word. So parliamentary democracy with its pulls and pushes was not the highest form of government, according to Gandhiji. That's a different cup of tea altogether, maybe a cup of coffee. But he stuck to his views. But the thing about Hind Swaraj, there are two things. I mean, there are many things, but the two things that I find extraordinary is that it is a critique of modernity. And basically, Gandhi is saying that modernity is suicidal because without dharma and moksha, artha and kama will turn us all into such fervid and unrestrained consumers that we will just kill ourselves. We will destroy the environment, we will overconsume, and the planet Earth, will be uninhabitable. It'll be overrun by human consumers like locusts overrunning a field. I mean, these are images that Gandhi uses. I'm not making them up. So, this is one of the extraordinary things about Hind Swaraj. But the other extraordinary thing about this book is that Gandhiji comes up with a new handbook, toolkit, if you will. Toolkit has become a popular word now. Toolkit for non-violent revolution through satyagraha, which basically means you have to change. The change agent has to be you. But the bar is so high, it's so very high that I don't know who will qualify. So that's a different matter. But the same year, another extraordinary book was written, The Indian War of Independence by Veer Savarkar, sitting in the British Library using mostly British sources. And in his book, he praises the openness of the British system because he asked the librarian that this is what he wanted to write about, the so-called mutiny. And the librarian said, yes, go for it. And he gave him all the sources. So there's something to be said about liberal democracies, and for liberal spaces such as the Bangalore International Center. We cherish them and we need to protect them. Anyhow, so he wrote this book, and it was obviously banned even before it was published. It was smuggled out, it was translated and retranslated. And the long and short is we don't have the original manuscript at all. And, we have a reconstructed version of the book, but we have the first publication of the book in 1909. The Columbia University has it, and I have a digital copy. I've referred to it in my book. And in a way, of course, the book was banned, and Gandhiji's Hind Swaraj was banned. But in a sense, the first War of Independence was banned right up to 47. It was never properly published. And even thereafter, under the Congress governments, it was again very difficult to get so-called Savarkar material, okay? So there were all kinds of bans, shadow bans, if you will. But the book is not incendiary in that sense. It simply advocates a violent overthrow of the British rule, and it celebrates. Actually, pardon me if I'm being a little, irreverent. It reminded me of Kill Bill. Have you seen Kill Bill? I mean, there's a word for what that movie shows, which is streams of blood. I can't remember what philia it is. I don't know what blood is called, but so movies which show you streams of blood, it's apparently something erotic or aesthetic at least. So Savarkar, if you want to interpret it again, as I do, it's got streams of blood. And it's actually the goddess, if you like, who presides, talking about, very dangerous and frightening goddesses. It would be the Smashan Kali, So he celebrates those violent scenes of the Great Revolt. And he says, yes, and I quoted those passages, blood, blood, blood. So it's basically saying you win freedom, only when you can wade through rivers of blood. And we are a bit squeamish, Hindus are squeamish. Not everybody is equally squeamish. But you go to the French, national museums, it's all about blood. Nations can only be created in blood, through blood, frankly. I mean, you can ask me a question on this, but it's not a tea party. Even the Boston Tea Party was not pleasant. And Mao's revolution was not pleasant. Many leftists in India admire it, but the bloodletting was immense. And I think Mao was one of the great killers of human history, as we now know him. 40 million people died under his watch. And the source of this is Frank Decatur's tetralogy on the years of Mao's China. And they were not killed as they were killed in Stalinist Russia or in the Nazi concentration camps, but they were killed because of the Great Leap Forward, where millions starved to death, about 20, 30 million people. And in the Cultural Revolution, many more millions died. And this is fairly well documented. Don't take my word for it or for anything I say. So these are cults which celebrate death, I feel. They are death cults. These are cults of death. So, in a sense, Savarkar also celebrates death if it leads to freedom. So, it's just a thing to think about. But it's a great book. It's the first book which looks at the revolt from the Indian point of view. And it has a galaxy of heroes and heroines which today have entered the pantheon of the Indian freedom movement. But it's Savarkar who initiates that, you might say, that revision, the revisionism, and he creates the nationalist historiography, okay? And all the other so-called nationalist historiographers, as it were, are in the wake or in the shadow of that first book. And yet, it's not just a book of history. It's also a handbook of toolkit. It's also a handbook of revolution. And he writes that he writes the book not to look at the past, but to the future and to show Indians how to overthrow the British. So it's a remarkable book. So in a way, my book is also a tale of two books, and the two books are also contending for our attention and appreciation. So that's the second time that Gandhiji and Veer Savarkar met at the India House, and then they wrote these two books. Okay, of course, Savarkar's book was more or less already written, but Gandhiji wrote this book almost as a response. Okay, and they also met in Ratnagiri, as I said, where Savarkar warned Gandhiji that, look, your policies are going to be disastrous for India. And Gandhiji said, oh, I beg to disagree, and so on and so forth. And earlier in 1920s, Gandhiji wrote to the Viceroy to release the Savarkar brothers. Okay, there were mercy petitions of Savarkar, but they were endorsed by Gandhiji, who said these are two great patriots and they have suffered a lot, so please release them. Now, from the other side, they were not so generous towards Gandhiji. In fact, I find that nobody was generous to Gandhiji. Dr. Ambedkar was very harsh. He called Gandhi, whatever. I don't even want to go into those names. Savarkar called him a madcap. You can almost everybody. Jinnah. There's a new book called Mohan and Muhammad by the late Meghnad Desai. And you will see that most people, most of his contemporaries, were not charitable to Gandhiji. Though Bose was very, I would say, gracious and named one of his regiments, or maybe that was ironic, the regiments of the Indian National Army. He called it a Gandhi regiment. Maybe that was a joke. We don't know. But generally, he's received short shrift from everybody. And Savarkar and the brothers Savarkar had no love lost. In fact, Baba Rao of Savarkar, the elder brother, accused Gandhi of conspiring with the king of Afghanistan to invade India and make India a Muslim Rashtra. I haven't found evidence for that, but the accusation is there. It's in his book. I've read the book. And it's a very moving book, and he gives you all kinds of so-and-so told me, etc. So these were the three known encounters between them. And my book has a fourth encounter. And I don't want to be a spoiler, but it's the epilogue of my book. And it's based, the model of it is the Swargarohan Parva of the Mahabharata. So I stage an encounter between Savarkar and Gandhi in the afterlife. And not in heaven, but in hell. And Savarkar enters hell after fasting to death. I hope you know that. He fasted to death. He didn't even drink water. So both these great men did these purificatory fasts before dying. Gandhiji fasted for 13 days. And before his last, yagya for the nation, before he was shot by Nathuram, assassinated, and before that, a bomb was flung on the 20th of January, 1948, on the same premises of the Birla House. A bomb was thrown by the same set of conspirators, and the same set of conspirators whom Madanlal Pahwa said to the team interrogating him, "Fir se aayega." It's all written down. It's all recorded. I'm not making it up. फिर से आएगा and फिर से आया. These are facts, right? He also fasted. Both people fasted. So in my book, you have a very emaciated Savarkar entering, hell in his topi and jacket. They wear the same clothes so that you recognize them, right? You have to stage it. And who is it that welcomes him there? It's Gandhiji. And so he says, "Oh, you're here too? My goodness, I was trying to get away from you all my life and you show up here." And there's an exchange. So please read it. Go buy the book. Okay, support a poor author. Buy the book. I'll also sign it for you. And you will see how that conversation unfolds. And I'll just say that even the Pandavas had to spend a little bit of time in hell before they qualified to be in heaven. And I call that epilogue, where all enmity ceases. So there is a space where all enmity ceases, okay? And usually it's a space in the afterlife, whether you go by the Dantean notion of the afterlife or whichever notion, because, our ideas, ideologies, beliefs, hatreds, likes, dislikes, all of these are ephemeral. They're all as transient as we are. None of these is permanent. So though old quarrels persist, these quarrels, like family quarrels, can also be resolved, is what I argue in the book. And the Swaraj spectrum, or even the Sanatana Dharma spectrum, allows for both a Savarkar and a Gandhi. In fact, for both a Nathuram and a Gandhi, which is strange because both of them swear by the Gita. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Siddhartha. We have a campus on the outskirts of Bangalore called Fireflies. And we are involved with a lot of social issues, climate being a major issue, which I think very few people talk about. But that could be the most serious challenge in the years to come. We are also into interfaith dialogue. And Makarand and me are very old friends, and we've traveled together in different parts of the world. Makarand, I think this has been one of your best talks. And I think this is the kind of discussion we need in this country. Because what you say, revenge is not the solution, and appeasement is not the solution. So could we have a kind of cultural nationalism which is compassionate, which is inclusive? Because I think, we are heading for very difficult times. Because just on the issue of climate, in 30, 40 years, all our coastal cities will go underwater. The sea levels rising. The economy will go for a 6. People don't talk about this, not just in India, but all over the world. This year in the district, HD Kote district I'm working in, 60% of the crops have failed. The rainfall was so intense. So this is again climate change. You have drought and you have extreme weather events like this. So shortages of food, climate refugees on millions of them. Many parts of India, Delhi, I think last year touched 50 degrees, almost 50 degrees. So, many parts of India will become unlivable. So I think in this situation, we have to see how do we create dialogue, how do we create a cultural nationalism which is compassionate, because we are we are a society of different castes, communities, languages, etc. And if we unleash violence and revenge, then it's going to be, I think there's something in the Indian psyche which is against violence. Because I remember once, a comparison between Latin America and India. Latin America, revolutions happened, all kinds of violent revolutions. India, which for many years was one of the poorest countries in the world, we didn't have, any large-scale violence. Even now, you don't have, large-scale violence. So there is something in the Indian psyche which accommodates, which which is not for violence. So I think this is one of the, to my mind, one of the important notions of cultural nationalism. How do you have an inclusive cultural nationalism which draws upon the rich spiritual heritage of this country and yet shows the world that this is a universal type of approach?
Yeah, totally. Of course, my book doesn't talk about climate and some of these issues that confront humanity. But it seems to me that, humanity is at a crossroads in a way. Maybe we are always at a crossroads. And I think that, piecemeal solutions are not going to work anymore. And I think human beings in general only transform when they must. We always mutate kicking and screaming, so to speak. It's never, except for a few who really want to change, right? Most of humanity only changes under that pressure that either you change or you die, basically. And I think that we are being pushed. It's like a pressure chamber, and humanity, and there are multiple things. You mentioned the climate crisis, there's an economic crisis, there's a political crisis, the geopolitical, strategic, so it's multiple. And if you look at the environment, obviously, the nation state is not the unit to address it, because rivers in India originate in Tibet. So, everything is interconnected when it comes to our environment, when it comes to Mother Gaia or Mother Earth or whatever. So the nation state itself is a kind of obsolete entity in the social evolution of humankind. But we'll have to reserve this for another occasion, because I want to focus on the book. And as to the point that you made about inclusive cultural nationalism, I couldn't agree more. In fact, just yesterday we were discussing about it, that no matter what Savarkar said in his pamphlet Hindutva, which is a work in progress, if you really look at it, he's not starting with a conclusion. He's saying, okay, how do I go about coming up with a definition of a Hindu that fits? And he really engages with it, and then even considers an exception like Sister Nivedita, more Hindu than most. And he says, oh, you know what, but that's an exception. So his focus is to really create a political constituency which will face the challenges of his own time, basically. And those times were, very different from our times. Anyhow, the point is that up to his book on the Indian War of Independence, Savarkar had a Hindu-Muslim unified front fighting the British. He changes. It's the Khilafat that completely changes him, and his experience in Andamans, where there is evidence to suggest that, there were, like, the prisoners were tortured, by Pathans, and many converted even at that time. Whatever the reasons be, he understood the dangers of Muslim separatism much before anybody else, I think, in its largest fashion. And then, closer to 1947, Dr. Ambedkar has written about this, about Pakistan, about what's going to happen, right? So an inclusive nationalism, cultural nationalism, as you said, is actually desirable. And what I wanted to say is that Savarkar didn't start off being anti anybody. And very interestingly, the constitution of the Hindu Mahasabha does not have two kinds of citizenships, one for Hindus and one for non-Hindus. No, it's almost the same, though it's much briefer than our present constitution. So the point I'm trying to make is that the problem is from the other side, as I understand it. It's not from this side. So even in the history of independent India, we didn't go and invade China. China invaded us, right? And we didn't invade Pakistan. It's the Pakistan tribals, actually disguised and led by the army that invaded India in 47 itself, October 47. And that conflict lasted till January, and it's still not settled. So, who are the aggressors? These are questions we should ask. Maybe you can say, okay, in IPKF, we went to Sri Lanka, we invaded, but we didn't go and conquer. Jayavardhane invaded India, and I don't think that was a good move. And somebody paid for their life. Rajiv Gandhi was killed. So, who are the invaders? And who did the Pahalgam? We didn't go and kill some people there. So, I'm saying the problem is, so that's why I say one of the things I've said in my book is that this dichotomy between Savarkar and Gandhi is a false dichotomy. The real dichotomy is between Swaraj and Jihad. I'm not saying Jihad, Swaraj and Islam. I'm not saying that. There are many kinds of Islam, as there are many kinds of Hinduism. But there is a kind of militant and violent Islam or Islamist or Islamicism, which is very much alive. Look at Hamas, what they did. It's going on, and there are websites, I've tracked some of it, and there are more than 50, 60,000 people killed by terrorist attacks all over the world in the last 2 years. I've got statistics, and there are independent organizations and NGOs tracking this. And it's recorded. You can see it on the web. You know how many violent incidents, by which terrorist groups, their affiliations, how many people died. And they're not like one or two, they're like 250. So, where is the problem? We have to understand that. And the misconception, whether mischievous or deliberate, is to say, oh, there's a Hindu terror. And the real problem is Hindutva. And this is all over the world. I mean, it's not here. The slanting of the narrative is all over the world. Currently I'm in the United States, and everywhere you see all the Hindu leftists. They'll always say Hindutva is the enemy, Hindutva is the enemy. None of them is saying Islamist, jihadist, terror is also an enemy. Forget about saying it is the enemy. So this slanting is very dangerous, and it's creating a backlash. So many essentially peaceful and kind Hindus have become very angry because of this negationism, denialism, and in the name of inclusive cultural nationalism, it's really a way to target, like we've seen just now, all these Colonel Purohit, and they've all been released, unless you say the judicial process was slanted. And then they said in the Godhra riots, the fire bombs or whatever, the fire was set from inside. Who would do that? So you see the entire narrative that has been built and who's funding it. So that's not what I deal with in the book, but I've become very skeptical of these received narratives. And history also, you don't have to, you see temple after temple destroyed. In fact, in my book, I say there's no image, no icon that is not disfigured. You show me one. All over India, in every museum, every icon is disfigured. And not only in India, go to Greece, go anywhere in the world. So this is universal. Victory towers were universal. It's not only our problem. So I'm saying that we have to be very self-critical and very forgiving, even forgetful, but that's not the way. In my book, I say we need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And if I were a Muslim, I would say, that, okay, whatever happened, please don't blame me, but I don't approve of it. I don't approve of theologically sanctioned vandalism. And the Bamyan Buddhas were destroyed not too long ago. It happened before our eyes, as it were. So whenever there's a violent incident, the first thing that happens, in Bangladesh it happens. How many temples were destroyed in so-called secular India in Kashmir? More than 250. They've been recorded. So this is an ongoing thing. And it's changing from the Middle East. We thought we would change in India. You said the Indian psyche is against violence. I completely agree. But the change hasn't happened here. Gandhiji thought India would be the change agent and the change maker. It's starting in Saudi. They have, in fact, Crown Prince Salman Mohammed bin Salman has in fact rejected several hadiths also. And several portions of the Quran, he says, we don't have to pay attention to them. They were in that period. How many in India can say that? Tell me, in Bangalore city, we've done so many interfaiths. I've never found anybody saying, you know what, my religion also has a lot of problems. I need to change. I don't hear that. And I'm not blaming them. It's very difficult, maybe, in their own community or wherever. And the moment you're a liberal Muslim, you lose whatever traction you have in your community. If you're a liberal Hindu, you become the champion of your community. So, to answer your question, not with regards to climate change, but social division in our own country, I think the greater responsibility in this lies on the other side. And there too, most of the people, we are talking about common DNA and all, and the Sarsanga Chalak, Dr. Mohan Bhagwat made that point, and I call them alt Hindus, hyper Hindus, they all attacked him for saying it, for even saying that there's a common DNA. He was attacked, right? But most of them have been victims. They are not aggressors. They probably converted under duress, under very difficult circumstances. So if you have to pay the jizya or convert, can you afford to pay that extra tax? So where is that critique, of us and them? So this is what I said, that if you have an exclusive faith tradition where you say that nobody but those who follow this or that will either go to heaven or get their salvation, then the problem lies there. It's not the problem of the pluralists and the deep pluralists to account for the intolerance of the other side. How can we? That move has to come from that side. So I completely agree. In fact, I'm glad you said that. Not only that, I don't think we should become like them. In order to combat them, then you lose your own essence. Then there'll be no Sanatan Dharma left. So, and I say this even, that the god or the goddess that we worship adopts a fierce form only for a very short duration. Only when that battle is, already in progress and you've got to kill the Asura. They're not always belligerent, but now the angry Hanuman has become standardized. Hanuman is not always angry. He's actually a very benign person, Most of the gods and gods, they're very happy and benign in your own home state of Kerala. So the temples are so beautiful. And I went to a temple and I rang the bell. And somebody there said, why are you ringing the bell? So I said, well, I'm sorry, I'm not from Kerala. I don't know if I've done anything wrong. But wherever I am, in so-called North India or Western India, we always ring the bell. So he said, in Kerala, the gods are happy. We don't need to wake them up, and we are happy too. We are also happy. I think that was profound. And, so you ring the bell to say, hey, I've come. Bless me, I don't ring the bell now, Otherwise, earlier I didn't want to miss out on that experience of ringing the bell. Now I don't, because I'm at peace. And I go to the deity and I say, you're at peace, I'm at peace. So that is who we are. We don't want to be belligerent all the time. So intermediate hermeneutics is not succumbing to the temptation of this reactive. As you said, you become the mirror image of what you oppose. And it's a mimetic violence. They are violent, you're violent. So it's an endless cycle.
So briefly, Gandhi was a world historical figure. Right? His contribution to India and to the world is immense. Even his political adversaries considered that he created the first true national mass movement in India. The manner in which he conducted independence struggle won the respect of even his opponents, the British nominally, and it also enabled the creation of a generation of leaders who were deep patriots, Nehru, Patel, Ambedkar, and so on, who were able to carry the nation forward with the memories of this freedom struggle behind them forward. He's admired all over the world. Martin Luther King Jr. in the US.
Got it. Go ahead.
Right. So his method has been replicated. Savarkar is at best a peripheral, marginal figure, obscure figure whose contributions are at best, obscure, right, nebulous. So my question is, and it's not a rhetorical question because it's a serious book. Are we making a mistake putting Gandhi and Savarkar in the same sentence?
Okay, thank you. It's a good question, and the answer is no, because the contributions of very important figures are sometimes not recognized. It takes a long time. And I invite you to reflect on the contributions of these so-called allied Hindu organizations, of which Savarkar is one member. He's not the sole person who represents that ideological, political, cultural, nationalist, whatever strand. Okay? The RSS is another. Hedgewar, Keshav Baliram Hedgewar, born in the same year as Nehru, 1889. His contribution is completely ignored. But how many prime ministers they've given this country? Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Narendra Modi, home ministers, LK Advani, now, I don't even, presidents of India, vice president. How can you forget that? You can't. So now more and more material will come out, more research will come out. Like, see, Netaji was also completely suppressed, both. But he did something extraordinary, right? I mean, imagine trying to raise an army, going abroad, he met Hitler, then he went in a submarine. Now, all of that has been recorded. He's got good biographers like Sugato Bose. The family was powerful. So these things take time. So the thing I want to say to you, frankly, in a friendly spirit, is that the independence struggle, okay, was an epic. But there are two kinds of epics in India, as my friend Ganesh Devi says, of many heroes and of one hero. So Ramayana is an epic of one hero, but not the Mahabharata. So the freedom movement is an epic of many heroes. And that's what I'm saying. The Swaraj spectrum has room for all. But why am I pitting them, as you would like to put it? Putting them or pitting them? Well, there's a reason, because today Hindutva has become almost the state ideology. I mean, in, the first time that the BJP was in power, they were still talking about Gandhian socialism. You read the BJP manifestos under Atal Bihari Vajpayee. They don't do that anymore. What happened? Right? And again, going back to an earlier question, I'm very much, see, in all ideologies, there's a Mahayana and a Hinayana. So even Hindutva has a Mahayana, okay, which is a soft Hindutva, inclusive. You can change your names, but you can't change your approach to things. And I'll just finish this by saying there is a Hi, Bhi, Nyaya. He in Hindi means only, Bhi means also. So I'm for the also Nyaya, not this or that, but this and that. So speaking about the city of Bangalore, Anantamurthy, the late Anantamurthy, wrote a book called Hindutva or Hind Swaraj. So I refer to that, and I'm saying Hindutva and. I've changed that. And speaking about great writers in the city, we lost S.L. Bhairappa on the 24th, I think. And it's sad, but I was supposed to see him on the 23rd or 24th, and he was ailing. And one of the last things he did was to write a little thing on my book, and it's there if you look at it, front page. It's one of his last literary acts, and also an act of generosity and kindness for a younger writer. And just as an aside, many people don't consider him a major writer, but I certainly do. The reason I do is because he can't be fitted into the, Navodaya, Navya, Bandaya. He did all of those things and more. And since he wasn't state sponsored and didn't have a big backing, he made his own money. He sold books in the thousands, hundreds of thousands, and also movies were made. Vamsa Vriksha was a big movie, as you all know, etc., etc. So he's a writer who writes in multiple genres and transcends these straitjackets and our narrow ways of trying to understand writers. And some of his books are really about the poetics of history. So poaching on, again, counter-poaching on historians. I mean, our greatest historians are not really historians. Kalhana is Kavya, and Tolstoy, the greatest historian of the French invasion of Russia, he's not a historian. So similarly, Avarana is a great work of history if you read it, about the Vijayanagar Empire, about Tipu. and all with sources. So this is a culture of debate and dissent and of mutual, whatever, respect when we disagree. So I'll leave it there. So,
Thank you, Makarand. I don't have a question today, and it's going to be very difficult for me to organize my thoughts. You've done them so beautifully. To replace or even be anywhere close to that is very difficult. But I do wish to contribute, if possible, quote unquote, to today's discussion. And I mean, that gentleman's question. You know, let me start by saying I'm very fond of Gandhiji. I have affection for him. He's my great grandfather. And in any questionable circumstances, any place where there's a question, I'll always bat for him because I come from that team. But having said that, you know, you're standing in the limelight right now. Does that make any one of us less significant? So that's the answer to him, that, you know, for whatever reasons, the limelight was on Gandhiji as an actor in the multi-actor movement. But in my view, from the first time I read about Savarkar till date, and after reading your book even more so, I believe both of them had the one fundamental quality which most forget, and that was their love for Bharat Mata. That is unquestionable. If you go with that premise, then everything will follow. If you forget that premise, then prejudice follows. And I'm so grateful to you that you did not, in the book, get into these prejudicial things, and you did not try to answer the question as who was better. I'm deeply, deeply grateful because you have left the space for people to think. I'm also have a comment on Hind Swaraj because I read it very deeply. I think it's going to be a very difficult book for anybody unless they are serious spiritual aspirants. I'm talking of Sanatan Dharma and the spiritual journey. If you are a serious spiritual aspirant, which I have had become now, I should share with you that I had the good fortune of walking on foot in the Padayatra led by my guru, I call him, and he accepts me as his disciple, Sri M. I walked from Kanyakumari to Srinagar with him over 7,500 kilometers. And Bharat Maa ka Achal bahut bada hai. You know, so to say that inclusive cultural nationalism is required, it's already existing. It doesn't mean that you straitjacket this and say that inclusivity, when you talk about inclusivity, you must also accept that there will be times of peace and there will also be times of a little bit of bumpy roads. You can't just want a highway if you have to be truly inclusive. And I notice that there is a diffidence whenever we try to analyze the strengths of our nation. We say all kinds of different things, except that the foundation is strong because Sanatan Dharma is all inclusive and accepts plural. This is the Bharat Maa ka Achal. You take away the Sanatan Dharma, which is the life breath of Mother India, she will not be the same. I have walked this land and my views have changed. And they superimpose on you and you bring them out very, very beautifully. So I'm deeply grateful to you for this wonderful book, and you gave me an opportunity to write a few words on that. That's on now on Hindutva. But Hindutva, again, why do we look at the different meanings? The word itself means the tattva, the essence of Hindu. I don't know the word Hindu, where it comes from, but originally it is Sanatan Dharma. So if the foundation is self-correcting itself, give it time. It's not going to happen overnight. There is a self-correction which will take place. Violence is a part of it. And at the end of the day, those of us who follow Sanatan Dharma believe that there is a divine hand in everything. So if Gandhi had a divine spark in him, so did Savarkar. They are instruments of the same divine. So how can you start judging one or the other, is what I would like to say. And I don't have, I'd love to shoot the breeze with you someday, but I don't want to monopolize the time. So thank you so much.
thank you for that beautiful meditation, I just want to add as a footnote that as a Sanatani, I think all traditions are self-correcting. They will all correct in their own time and space. And if they don't, as Vivekananda said, they will be lost in the sands of time, because humanity is one after all, and no matter what name and culture and community, the Homo sapiens sapiens species itself has a common culture. And we are learning, I guess, through a difficult process. Sometimes it's very violent. And violence is very much a part of everyday life. I mean, you can't have agriculture without violence, so to speak. So, anyhow, if there are more questions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Paransby. I am Kaushik. I am a reluctant, visitor here because I find it very difficult to wake up early in the morning. But my son here brings me and he
Thank you.
encourages me to come.
Maybe he should ask the question.
I think he will. So I had a couple of points to make. Maybe they are not questions, but there are a couple of points. First of all, I love the premise that of your book, where you say that there is the trauma and we have to sort of know how to engage with the trauma in order to heal. If I were to frame it as a question, why is it so difficult for us, for nations or for people of a country with such a long past? Why is it so difficult for us to learn how to deal with the trauma? Because we are enlightened people, Indians are very, very spiritual, very enlightened. What generally holds back these people from, addressing the trauma? That is number one. Number two, why is it becoming so difficult for people to hold Savarkar and Gandhi in the same mind space? Whereas when we look at our past, when we look at our own history, we've always been a people of so many contradictions and diversity, millions of gods, so many narratives. Even Ganesha's birth has 3 different stories. And we are so comfortable holding all the 3 different stories in our mind. But why is it of late for me, because I only notice now, why is it becoming so difficult for us to hold opposing views in our mind? Why have we become so binary? They are the 2 points I would like to make.
Good question. In fact, I will start with the answer to the first question. Nothing holds you back. Whenever you want to change, you can change instantly. But when you don't change, then you'll have to go into why. And the answer is, we are so invested in ignorance. We are invested in all of this. We give our energy to all of this. And the moment we realize it's not worth giving our energy to these things, you can flip out of it immediately. Anyhow, the second question is a little more complicated because there are so many interests involved who are benefiting from the polarization, who need it also. So the requirement at a bigger level, social level, is much higher, that you have to negotiate those, conflicting and contradictory imperatives or inducements or blandishments where conflicting interests are involved. So how do you do that? That's very complicated because you're getting, mobilized and polarized and weaponized in a particular manner day after day. Look at, what happens with the moment you get up, you open your telephone and see what's happening. So it's not innocent. It's insidious and deliberate. Human beings are highly programmable. Frankly, I mean, everybody talks about human exceptionalism. No, I think we are as programmable as machines are. So unless we do not want to be programmable. And so the good news is nothing prevents us from changing. We can do it right now as we speak. Thank you for your question.
Okay, so I brought your book. I'm still reading it. One interesting point you made about M.K. Gandhi quoting Purushartha, right?
Yes.
Without moksha and dharma, the artha kama tends to let take the society wayward. And I was reminded of the discussion in Mahabharata where each of the Pandavas, they bat for a Purushartha, right? It's not like, but they manage to find a consensus, right? So, same way, is there, like, can there be a discussion anchored on the Purushartha, which can bring aspects of both the spectrum, both the ends of spectrum, to a consensus?
Yeah,
That's
thank you.
something
That is Dr. Sai Swarupa. She was in Chanakya University. She's a very well-known writer. Now, the Purushartha framework is really fascinating, and I mentioned it in the passing in my book. One of the things I do in the book is also to bring in all these really important people, not only those who influence me, but who try to offer a Swarajist narrative and historiography. So the Purushartha framework was actually, as it were, brought into the common discourse by Professor K.J. Shah in Dharwad. And then, Dayakrishna wrote a book against it, Professor Dayakrishna. It's a very interesting book to read. And he says that basically Hindu texts do not follow the Purusharthas. And it's a good book, you have to read it. Anyhow. And then it was then used by Anthony J. Parel in his edition of Hind Swaraj. And then later, he wrote a whole volume on Purusharthas and Gandhiji, And that's a very interesting framework because Gandhiji had a lot of problems with karma. So he was a very passionate man, when we see his relationship with Kasturba and his terrible guilt, about, you can read in his own accounts, I don't have to talk about it. And that child was stillborn, his father was dying, and so forth. So he was a very passionate man. And karma, so he flipped from being very passionate to being abstemious. So we don't know whether he was able to have a comfortable relationship with karma. And those experiments which have been sort of blown out of proportion today, in the sense they were open, it was nothing secret. And to call him this and that is a terrible thing. Anyhow, those were experiments. Maybe they were completely wrong. We don't accept them. Again, things you don't agree with. But did it have to do with karma? And talking about Mahabharata, karma is a very big problem. I mean, everybody has a problem with karma. That's how the Mahabharata starts, with Shantanu. I mean, with Matsya Gandha. I mean, tell me where. There's no problem with karma. Look at Draupadi. Look at her children first. Look at Karna's birth. She's not married. That's what the text tells you, right? There's a lot of issues with karma. Pandu, So Maithun, he dies in that act. So this is a very deep problem or issue, and we don't have the space in India to talk about it. So the Purusharthas in general, as a framework to understand not just classical Indian texts, which the texts themselves tell you that these are conducive to Purusharthas, but major events in our nation. It's a very, I think, inviting and fertile territory, and to look at the freedom struggle in terms of the Purusharthas would be very interesting. Now, about Gandhi and Savarkar, Gandhiji wrote a lot about Purusharthas because he felt that Purusharthas were man-making or woman-making. Gandhi's text is full of being manly. So everybody thinks, oh, he was cowardly. He was not at all cowardly, by the way. Interestingly, both of them were fearless in their own ways. They overcame fear, and that's a great thing, and they teach us to be fearless in different ways. And that's why I write in my book, they were both, I'm so glad you pointed out that what is in common. I said Swaraj, but you said the love of Bharat Mata. Isn't that what all of us have in common? I would say the allowable, even desirable exceptionalism is what we feel about this land. And yesterday somebody asked the question about Vishwaguru and all. So I said in the answer that we look for a guru because we all experience, being limited, and we want to become limitless. We have a sense inside us that we want to be limitless. So when we join ourselves with something that is limitless, we also become limitless. So people will join with Bharat because all the nations also want to be limitless, you see. So obviously there's something that attracts people to this place, and it's been called The Passage to India by E.M. Forster. I mentioned that also in my book. But therefore, the Purusharthas, I think that when you think about dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, dharma, certainly Gandhiji was trying to do dharma, so was Savarkar, right? Artha, both believed that you had to get the means to do it. Both wanted moksha in different ways. Gandhiji said, I would never be in politics, except that politics is strangulating us like the python, the coils of a python. So I'm only interested in self-realization. That's what he says. And Savarkar was not a traditional observant Hindu of the ordinary kind. He was a very modern person, but could we say he was not interested in moksha? I think he was. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done that extremely difficult kind of. And he invented a word for it. He didn't call it, we call it, we say suicide in Hindi. You either say khudkushi or atmahatya. He said atmarpan. Savarkar was a great intellect. He was a great writer. If you know Marathi, he wrote plays, poems. So he invented new vocabulary, And some of it has worked, some of it hasn't. Like, what is the Hindu word for a martyr? Because we don't believe in martyring ourselves. We love life. So he invented a word, hutatma. So I don't know what that, only in Mumbai they say hutatma chowk. So the word hasn't caught on, but he invented a word. They still say shahadat, or they say balidan, which I don't like. Bali, these devis sometimes, we had balis and all, by the way. So to answer your question, I would like to read a little more about Savarkar if he had things to say about Purusharthas. But I believe that they were both trying to find and follow dharma. They wanted to employ or deploy the right means, which was artha. I think both had issues with kama. We don't know too much about Savarkar. He doesn't tell us about that part of his life, though he had children. He had a life and a wife, as it were. And there was so much privation. His wife suffered. Everybody suffered. Because the British, once they target you, they really destroyed so many lives, right? And moksha, I think both wanted. So the Purushartha framework is, I think, a very fertile and useful framework. Thank you for that.
So my name is Dhananjay. I'm IT engineer.
Hi.
Yeah. So my question is regarding the caste eradication movements.
Yes.
So one was Harijan, and another movement was Patit Pawan. So did they collaborate at any point of time? Have you touched it in your book?
Yeah, well, they didn't officially collaborate, but the ideas were swimming around. And Savarkar had this Sahapankti Bhojan before the standardized Preeti Bhojan. In all Gandhian programs, they had Preeti Bhojan. So both recognized that caste had to go root and branch as it was being practiced. But who has invested in continuing it, right? I don't have to spell it out. And I think it's going to be very difficult to have the kind of reform that either Savarkar or Gandhi, let alone Ambedkar, who wrote about the annihilation of caste. We are doing our best to continue caste, right? Even right now, as we speak, the enumeration, etc. Because Risley and all began all this, because the numbers translate into power and money and benefits and etc. So I think that ship has sailed. It's only about, I would say, competitive backwardness, the politics of competitive backwardness and competitive compensation. That's what's going to play out for as long as we can think in the future, I feel. But there are good movements, so that just as there are X people from different communities now, they're doing X whatever, and they're very brave. They say, we don't agree with this, and whatever we are, whoever X this, X that. There are also people who are saying, we are not going to take reservation. Okay, we have reached a level, and when we fill the form, we're not going to write, and I know such people. So it's a voluntary exiting, from that thing, and that gives me hope. But if you think it's going to come top down, I doubt it. I really doubt it. But so there was not an official collaboration, but I would say that there was a large consensus across India that this was something very iniquitous and really a blot on Hindu society, and that had to go. There was no excuse for it of any kind. Okay, thank you. On that note, maybe.
Yes.
Thank you all so much.
If you could all join me in thanking Professor Paranjape for his time and scholarship this morning.